Chapter 1. The Heart of a Demon Has No Regrets. A furious voice boomed across the isolated mountain peaks, ordering Fang Yuan to quietly hand over the spring-autumn cicada if he wanted a quick and merciful death. Another voice jeered from the crowd, telling the old bastard to stop attempting to resist, because every major faction of justice had combined forces today just to destroy his devil lair. The inescapable nets were cast all around the perimeter, and his absolute decapitation was a foregone conclusion. They called him a damned demon, shouting in righteous fury that he had slaughtered thousands of innocent people just to cultivate his precious time-reversing insect, committing unforgivable and heinous sins against the world. A woman stepped forward from the surrounding army, her voice trembling with centuries of burning hatred as she screamed that 300 years ago he had insulted her, stolen her body's purity, murdered her entire family, and executed 9 generations of her kin. She had hated him with a passionate intensity ever since, and today she demanded to watch him die. Fang Yuan stood calmly in the middle of the onslaught, dressed in deep green robes that had been torn completely to shreds. His long hair was thoroughly disheveled, and his entire body was slicked with fresh flowing blood. He quietly looked around at his surroundings. The bloody robes waved gently in the howling mountain breeze, resembling a tattered war flag surviving a catastrophic battle. Fresh blood leaked continuously from the numerous open wounds on his flesh, accumulating into a large crimson pool beneath his feet. After standing there for just a short while, his enemies tightly surrounded him on all sides, leaving absolutely no way out. It was an undeniable reality that he would die here today. Yet even in the literal face of his impending death, his expression did not change. It remained utterly, unnervingly calm. His gaze was quiet and his eyes resembled deep, bottomless pools of water that held no end. The major factions of justice surrounding him included not only highly experienced elders but also young, talented heroes. Some roared in fury while others sneered, their eyes gleaming with light as they warily held onto their wounds, refusing to let down their guard. Nobody moved. Everyone remained intensely cautious of Fang Yuan's final, desperate counterattack. For 6 long, agonizing hours, this tense standoff dragged on until evening arrived, the setting sun casting its final, dying rays upon the side of the mountain. In that spectacular moment, it looked as if the entire landscape was engulfed in a blazing fire. Fang Yuan, who had been as silent as a stone sculpture the entire time, slowly turned his body. The group of warriors immediately went on high alert, taking a large step backward in sudden panic. By now, the gray mountain rock beneath his feet had been stained a deep, permanent red. Due to the severe loss of blood, his face was deathly pale. Yet under the afterglow of the sunset, it suddenly held a brilliant, mesmerizing luster. Looking closely at the setting sun, he lightly laughed and softly recited a poem about how the sun sets above the blue mountain. The autumn moon accompanies the wind of spring. The morning is fine like hair and the night turns white like snow, and how whether one succeeds or fails. When looking back, there is absolutely nothing left. As the words left his lips, vivid memories of his previous life on Earth emerged before his eyes. He was originally a simple Chinese scholar who had chanced upon this mystical world. He had endured a grueling, hard life for 300 years, and then went through another 200 years of dominance. A total of 500 years of his life had flown by in the blink of an eye. He sighed emotionally in his heart, acknowledging that he had failed in the end. Yet he felt no regrets whatsoever. This end result was something he had foreseen from the very beginning, and he had prepared himself when making his choice. To be a demon was to be merciless and cruel, a murderer and destroyer who left no place in heaven or earth for himself, turning into an enemy to the world and facing the ultimate consequences. He thought to himself with a big laugh that if the spring-autumn cicada he had just cultivated was effective, he would still choose to be a demon in his next life. The warlord surged forward, screaming at the wicked demon to surrender the insect, but with a loud bang, Fang Yuan was entirely engulfed in a blinding surge of energy. Chapter 2. Going Back in Time. The spring rain quietly trickled down on Qingmao Mountain late into the night, accompanied by a slight, chilling breeze. Yet the mountain folks' home was not covered in total darkness. Dozens of tiny lights shone from tall buildings, numbering a few thousand across the terrain. Situated on the mountainside was Guyue Village, giving the vast, lonely mountain a rich touch of human civilization. In the middle of the village, a grand ceremony was being held inside a magnificent, brightly lit pavilion. The head of the Guyue clan, a middle-aged man with graying sideburns clothed in ceremonial white robes, knelt sincerely on the brownish-yellow floor, praying that the ancestors would bless the ceremony. and bring forth young men of outstanding talent and intelligence to provide new blood and hope for their families. Behind him knelt over 10 elders and important clan members of high authority, all solemnly pressing their hands to the floor and kowtowed, their foreheads making rhythmic, light thuds against the ground. When the ceremony concluded, the elders walked out into the corridor, their discussions slowly rising, as they hoped a genius would emerge this year, noting that the clan hadn't seen one in 3 years, while neighboring Bayansheng villages had produced terrifying talents like Binding Bing. However, they noted that hope wasn't entirely lost, as a young genius had appeared in Fang Ji's bloodline. This boy was able to talk after 3 months, walk after 4, and recite brilliant poetry like Jiang Jingju, Yong Mei, and Jiang Chengzi by the age of 5. It was a pity his parents died early, leaving him and his brother to be raised by their uncle and aunt. The clan head smiled, thinking that if this child showed A-grade potential, he could compete against Binding Bing, or at least become a banner for the clan as a B-grade. He instructed the elders to rest well and compete fairly without conspiracies, knowing that adopting an orphaned genius could secure a family line, 100 years of prosperity. At that exact moment, a pair of clear eyes quietly watched the sparkling village lights from a window. Fang Yuan let the rain hit his body as he realized, with complex feelings, that he was standing in Yue village 500 years in the past, meaning the spring-autumn cicada had actually worked. Legend held that a river of time supported the world's flow, and by paying with one's life and cultivation base as a driving force, one could travel back upstream. He clenched his pale, soft young palms, embracing the reality that his 500 years of experience felt like a dream, yet was entirely real. Though the spring-autumn cicada had dissipated after its single use, he knew he could refine it again. He possessed an incredible treasure: his memories of unopened wealth, historical opportunities, and rich combat experience. He knew he had to increase his cultivation foundation as fast as possible to survive the dangerous mountains, planning to borrow the clan's resources until he reached the 3rd level of a Gu master and could leave this cage. The bedroom door was lightly pushed open, and his twin brother Fang Zheng walked in. Fang Zheng was thin, slightly shorter than Fang Yuan, and shared his facial features, though he kept his head lowered out of a deeply ingrained sense of inferiority. He quietly asked why his big brother was standing in the rain, warning him that their uncle and aunt would be worried if he didn't sleep before tomorrow's awakening ceremony. Fang Zheng was used to his brother's cold indifference, viewing him as an unapproachable genius, while feeling like an ordinary ant himself. After years of being told to learn from his older twin, Fang Yuan laughed silently at the mention of their worried relatives, remembering how his aunt and uncle had grabbed their parents' inheritance and inflicted harsh treatment on them when they were 3-year-old orphans. Fang Yuan had only exposed his poetic genius to protect them from that cruelty, adopting a cold mask as a shield. His foolish brother had never seen the truth, being easily deceived by their relatives while burying deep resentment against Fang Yuan. In his past life, the ceremony had revealed that the prodigy Fang Yuan was a mere C-grade, while the overlooked Fang Zheng was a legendary A-grade, completely reversing their treatment and causing Fang Zheng to bitterly suppress his brother, feeling no hatred or resentment, but only a calm pursuit of immortality. Fang Yuan gave his brother a faint glance and told him to leave. Fang Zheng left, feeling as though his brother's razor-sharp eyes had completely stripped him naked in the snow. Chapter 3, Please Go Aside and Scram. The sharp clanging of the night. Watchmen's wooden clappers cut through the darkness, signaling the hour before dawn. Fang Yuan opened his dry eyelids, having slept for barely over 2 hours as he finalized his plans. His uncultivated body felt heavily exhausted, but his steel-like determination pushed the sleepiness away cleanly as he shoved his blanket aside and opened the window to breathe the fresh fragrance of earth and trees. The tall bamboo and wooden houses of the mountain folk rose in a sea of pale green, built on massive wooden stakes to handle the uneven terrain. From downstairs, the voice of his personal servant, Shen Kui, floated up as she carried a basin of warm water upstairs to help him wash his face and clean his teeth. With a willow twig and snow salt, she dressed him gently, deliberately rubbing her plump breasts against his back to seduce him, operating under the belief that he would gain a high talent, and she could become his concubine. Fang Yuan remained entirely expressionless, his heart cold as ice, knowing she was a vain girl who served as his aunt and uncle's watchdog, and would quickly turn on him with disdain once his status plummeted. He impatiently brushed her soft hands away and ordered her to leave. leaving her pouting and shattered by his sudden coldness. At the doorway stood Fang Zheng, his head bowed as he watched with a deep flicker of jealousy. Fang Zheng had been awake since the fourth watch out of sheer nervousness, and he resented that his brother received a beautiful young servant while he was given a fat, wide old wet nurse. Fang Zheng didn't dare underestimate Shen Kui because her mother, Mother Shen, was the highly trusted caretaker of the entire household. Fang Yuan asked if his brother was ready, and the two walked out into the streets. Joining a crowd of 15-year-old youths heading to the same destination, the surrounding teens whispered cautiously about Fang Yuan, calling him the arrogant poetry genius who looked down on everyone. Fang Zheng followed silently behind, feeling suffocated by his brother's massive shadow, while Fang Yuan secretly sneered at the gossip. With his sharp insight, Fang Yuan recognized his aunt and uncle's scheming intentions to instigate a rift between the brothers by distributing things unfairly. While he had hundreds of ways to suppress his brother, turn Shensi into a puppet, and beat the elders, he carefreely sighed, realizing these people were nothing but meaningless passers-by in life. As long as they didn't get in his way, they could simply go aside and scram. Chapter 4. Master Fang Yuan. The brilliant rays of the morning sun easily pierced through the thin mountain fog, illuminating a crowd of over 100 15-year-old youths gathered in front of the heavily guarded, 5-story clan pavilion. The academy elder, full of white hair and high spirits, led the teenagers through the great hall and down a constructed stone ladder into a spectacular, underground cave filled with stalactites, sparkling in gorgeous neon rainbow colors. Fang Yuan quietly walked within the crowd, knowing that hundreds of years ago, the clan had discovered a vital spirit, spring in this very cave that produced the primeval stones forming the village's financial foundation. After walking several hundred steps, they reached a wide underground river emitting a faint blue light that resembled a star river in the dark sky, showcasing fish and aquatic plants in its crystal-clear water. Opposite the river lay a closely cultivated sea of moon orchids, with crescent petals glowing like warm pearls on a bluish-green carpet. The elder instructed that those whose names were called must cross the knee-deep river and walk as far as possible into the flower sea, where an invisible wall of pressure from the spirit spring would block them. The orchids would emit dots of white light to ease the pressure, and walking further indicated a superior cultivation talent. The first youth, Chenbo, stepped forward seriously but was blocked after only 3 steps, leaving him deathly pale as the elder recorded that he had no talent to become a Gu master. The second youth failed after 4 steps. Then a sturdy youth named Mo Bei crossed the river, drawing shocked stares as he pushed through 36 steps to secure a coveted B-grade talent, measuring a 6x6 primeval sea. His horse-faced grandfather, Elder Mo Chen, laughed proudly in the dark, taunting his red-haired nemesis, Elder Qi Lian. An hour later, half the youths had crossed, resulting in an average mix of C and D grades alongside many failures, causing the clan head to sigh over their thinning bloodline. The elder then called out Qi Chen, the grandson of Elder Qi Lian, who managed to walk 36 steps as well, igniting another round of authority feuds between the two main factions. Fang Yuan stroked his chin, remembering that Chen had actually cheated with his grandfather's secret backing and only possessed a C-grade talent. Fang Yuan chose not to expose or blackmail them yet, knowing his low status would cause the plan to backfire. Suddenly, the academy elder's voice echoed through the cavern, calling out the name of Guyue Fang Yuan. Chapter 5. The First Human and the Awakening. In that pivotal moment, the underground cavern fell completely silent, and countless pairs of eyes locked onto Fang Yuan with intense anticipation. Walking across the glowing river under the heavy gaze of the masses, he felt the immediate crushing weight of the spirit spring's rich primeval ki, pressing down on his body like an invisible wall. Yet as he stepped forward, little spots of light began to drift upward from the moon orchids below his feet. These tiny dots of light swiftly enveloped his entire physical form before sinking deep into his abdomen. These were the Hopga. An ancient legend spoke directly of these creatures, stretching back to the dawn of the world when the land was a savage, brutal wilderness. The very first man, Renzu, lived a precarious and difficult life, constantly hunted by a pack of vicious wild beasts known as predicaments. Lacking a powerful physical form, sharp teeth, or claws, Renzu was trapped at the absolute bottom of nature's food chain. In his desperation, 3 Gu approached him, offering their supernatural assistance in exchange for his life energy. Renzu first gave away his youth to the strongest Gu, gaining immense raw strength to fight off the predatory beasts. However, he soon realized that strength alone was fragile, easily exhausted and insufficient against an entire horde of enemies. He then bitterly traded his middle years to the most beautiful Gu in exchange for wisdom. Wisdom allowed him to think, reflect, and accumulate vital experience, proving far more effective than raw power. But good times never lasted, and as old age caught up with Renzu, his muscles deteriorated and his mind slowed down. Realizing he had nothing left to provide, both strength and wisdom abandoned him, leaving him weakly exposed on the ground as the predicament surrounded him once more. It was in that moment of absolute despair that a third, tiny Gu spoke up, asking only for his heart. Though it appeared incredibly frail and gave off only a dim white light, the moment Renzu surrendered his heart, the Hope Gu erupted into an endless, blinding illumination. The surrounding predicament screamed in utter horror and retreated immediately. Terrified of hope, from that historic day onward, whenever a human faced a catastrophic predicament, they learned to give their heart to hope. Back in the reality of the cave, the stream of Hope Gu converged rapidly into Fang Yuan's body, gathering spontaneously 3 inches beneath his navel. Pushing through the pressure, he counted each step silently in his heart. 10 to 20 steps meant a D-grade talent, 20 to 30 steps indicated a C grade, while 30 to 40 signaled a B grade. Across the river, the clan head and the hidden elders frowned deeply as they noticed the swarming number of Hope Gu was far less than expected. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, marching forward to the 24th, 25th, 26th, and finally the 27th step. The moment his foot touched the 27th mark, a muffled explosion ripped through his internal organs. As the concentrated ball of light reached its absolute threshold, his mind went temporarily blank, his pores clamped shut, and his body broke into a heavy sweat as a magnificent, spiritual aperture was successfully opened out of thin air. He had grasped the hope of immortality, but to the watching crowd, his 27-step limit proved he was nothing more than a C-grade talent. Chapter 6. The road to the future will be interesting. The newly formed aperture inside Fang Yuan's body was a deeply mysterious and unusual space. Though it was located physically within him, it did not share the same space as his internal organs. It was endlessly huge, yet at the same exact time, infinitely small. Some scholars called it the Purple Prefecture, others the Chinese Pool, but the majority knew it simply as the primeval sea aperture, supported by a thin, protective membrane of flowing white light left behind by the exploded Hope Gu. The aperture housed a perfectly smooth, mirror-like expanse of water. It was a greenish-blue sea carrying a distinct copper luster. The signature, green coppery primeval essence. Belonging strictly to a rank 1 Gu master, this sea represented the absolute condensation of Fang Yuan's essence, vitality and soul, but its water level only reached 44% of the aperture's capacity, marking the concrete limitation of his C-grade talent. Finding himself physically blocked by a thick wall of spiritual pressure, Fang Yuan stopped at his 27th step and smiled with absolute indifference. Across the river, the academy elder shouted out in a final, desperate thread of hope, asking if he could truly go no further. Fang Yuan simply turned around and walked back, answering the elder with his direct actions. Instantly, a massive wave of shocked chatter and loud buzzing erupted from the teenage crowd. No one could believe that a celebrated genius had fallen so low, it turning out to be a mere C-grade. His twin brother, Fang Zheng, stared in complete disbelief, while the clan head clenched his fist tightly, his voice laced with bitter disappointment. In the darkness, the watching elders whispered among themselves, noting that while early childhood intelligence and memory could surpass the ordinary man, they did not dictate a person's ultimate primeval talent. Fang Yuan walked through the bone-chilling river water with a completely emotionless face. In his past life, this exact scene had caused him to trip, soaking his body as the cold, judgmental glares of the clan pierced his heart like sharp knives. But in this life, 500 years of living had left his heart completely anchored and calm. He understood deeply that the only truly interesting thing in a person's life is the relentless process of chasing one's own dreams. He would walk his own path entirely unbothered by the disappointment of others. The elder let out a deep, defeated sigh and called for Gu Yue Fangzheng to step forward. Snapping out of his shock, the younger twin ran out so hurriedly that he tripped over his own feet, groaned loudly, and tumbled headfirst into the river, sending the entire cave into roaring laughter. The clan head scoffed in annoyed boredom as Fang Zheng struggled clumsily on the slippery riverbed, his heart flustered by the mockery. Suddenly, a powerful hand gripped Fang Zheng's collar and pulled him upright. Looking up, he saw his older brother, who looked back with absolute calmness and a deep, thoughtful smile. Patting him on the back, Fang Yuan told him to go on, whispering that the road to the future would be interesting. Confused by his brother's unnatural composure, Fang Deng walked forward absent-mindedly into the flower sea. Completely lost in his thoughts, he accidentally pushed past every previous mark, walking deep into the orchids until he finally realized he had achieved an incredible 43 steps. The Academy Elder screamed in pure, unbridled madness, proclaiming the emergence of a legendary A-grade talent. In an instant, the elders hidden in the shadows lost all composure, shouting and fiercely bickering as Elder Qi Lian, Elder Mo Chen, and ultimately the clan head himself, tried to claim the newfound prodigy for their respective family lines. Chapter 7: The 9 Ranks of a Gu Master. A week quickly passed following the awakening ceremony. Inside the village academy, 57 students sat in orderly rows, listening with absolute fascination as the academy elder lectured with confidence and composure. He explained that humans stood above all creatures, while Gu were the absolute essence of heaven and earth. These mystical insects existed everywhere in the wild wilderness, deep within the soil, hidden in the bushes, and even nesting on the bodies of savage beasts. Over generations, ancient scholars gradually uncovered their secrets, learning to open their internal apertures and use their own primeval essence to feed, refine, and manipulate them. Having successfully opened their apertures 7 days prior, every youth in the room had officially entered the realm of a Rank 1 initial stage Gu Master, when a curious student stood up to ask for deeper technical details. Regarding the progression of power, the elder carefully detailed the grand structure of cultivation. Gu Masters walked a path divided into 9 grand ranks from bottom to top. Every single rank was considered a major realm, further subdivided into 4 distinct phases: the initial stage, the middle stage, the upper stage, and the peak stage. Advancement relied heavily on an individual's innate talent grade. A cultivator with a D grade talent possessed an aperture filled with only 20 to 30% primeval essence, capping their lifetime progression at rank 1 or 2. A C-grade talent held 40 to 50%, usually stopping at rank 2, though a lucky few might scratch the initial stage of rank 3. A B-grade talent enjoyed 60 to 70% capacity, allowing them to comfortably reach rank 3 or even rank 4 to become a respected clan elder. Finally, an A-grade talent possessed an abundant 80 to 90% primeval C, giving them the rare gift necessary to scale the heights of rank 5 and compete for the position of clan leader. Anything at rank 6 and beyond belonged strictly to the realm of myth and legend. As the elder spoke, the teenagers instinctively turned their heads to stare at Guyue Fangzheng, who sat rigidly in the front row as the clan's shining A-grade prodigy. Their eyes were filled with an intense mix of envy and jealousy. Simultaneously, quiet whispers and mocking giggles broke out as several students pointed toward the back corner of the classroom. Leaning heavily against his desk by the window, sleeping soundly through the entire lecture, was Fang Yuan. The schoolmates gossiped maliciously among themselves, noting that he had done nothing but sleep for a solid week. Rumors had spread across the village that he spent his entire night wandering the outer borders dead drunk, clutching a wine jar in complete despair. They smirked, assuming the psychological blow of falling from a fabled genius to a mediocre C-grade failure had completely broken his spirit, especially while his once overlooked younger brother soared straight to the heavens as the center of the clan's attention. The academy elder frowned deeply at the sight, his heart filled with a profound disappointment and annoyance toward Fang Yuan. He resolved that fostering someone with such a weak, fragile temperament would be an absolute waste of the clan's precious resources. Turning his full attention back toward nurturing Fang Zheng, the elder then transitioned the lesson into the grand history of the Gu Yue clan, recounting the legendary exploits of their rank 5 ancestors. He spoke highly of the 4th-generation clan head, a powerful and benevolent hero who had successfully defeated a notorious, high-ranking demonic thief known as the Flower Wine Monk. According to history, the defeated demon had dropped to his knees to beg for mercy, but the moment the merciful clan had lowered his guard, the treacherous monk unleashed a cowardly sneak attack. Though the furious clan had executed the demon on the spot, his heavy wounds proved incurable, leading to his tragic, untimely death. The teenagers shouted in collective rage at the story, cursing the sinister nature of the demonic faction. Awoken by the noisy chatter of his classmates, Fang Yuan slowly opened his sleepy eyes and stared out the window at the straight spear bamboos and verdant mountain groves. He felt a wave of internal resentment, wondering exactly where that wretched flower wine monk had crawled off to die. From his 500 years of future knowledge, Fang Yuan knew the official clan history was a complete fabrication. In about 2 months, a heartbroken and heavily intoxicated cultivator from the village would collapse outside the trenches. The intense aroma of his alcohol would accidentally attract the incredibly rare wild liquor worm. While pursuing the fleeing insect, the cultivator would stumble upon a hidden underground cave entrance, uncovering the true skeletal remains and valuable secret, inheritance left behind by the flower wine monk. Fang Yuan had been spending his nights buying jars of wine and scouting the village borders, specifically to replicate this event, hoping the liquor aroma would draw the liquor worm out of hiding. Unfortunately, his funds were running dangerously low, and time was ticking away. As the class drew to a close, the academy elder announced their very first official assessment. The students were ordered to visit the academy's closely guarded goo room to select a rank 1 insect. They were instructed to return home and focus entirely on wiping out the creature's wild will to claim it as their vital goo. The elder added a high-stakes incentive, promising a generous reward of 20 primeval stones to the first student who successfully completed the refinement. Chapter 8. Humans change, things stay the same. The excited crowd of teenagers immediately rushed out of the classroom, forming an anxious line outside the academy's designated goo room. When Fang Yuan's turn finally arrived, he stepped into the mysterious, dimly lit 60-square-meter vault. The 4 walls were completely embedded with nested square holes of various sizes, each housing specialized containers like gray stone basins, verdant jade dishes, exquisite grass cages, and earthen stoves. A literal symphony of life filled the air as hundreds of rank 1 goo worms chirped, clucked, and rustled inside their enclosures. Fang Yuan understood the critical gravity of this choice. The first insect a cultivator refined became their vital goo, permanently interconnecting its life force with their own. If it perished in battle, the master would suffer a catastrophic, near-fatal spiritual blow. While his absolute preference was to secure the flower wine monk's hidden liquor worm, he had no concrete leads on the skeleton's exact location. To ensure he didn't fall too far behind his peers, he chose a reliable backup plan and walked directly toward a row of silver plates on his left. Resting inside the dishes were the local specialties of the village. Moonlight goo, these human-cultivated quartz insects were beautifully shaped, like crystalline, light blue crescent moons. Fang Yuan casually selected one, noting that it felt as light as a single sheet of paper in his palm, yet transparent enough that he could read the fine lines of his skin right through its body. Placing the moon crescent safely into his pocket, he exited the vault and walked straight back to the village tavern. He emptied his pockets onto the counter, fishing out his very last pieces of primeval stone to purchase 2 more jars of aged wine. The short, oily shopkeeper masterfully weighed the stones in his hand, his smile deepening as he confirmed the currency was exact. In this world, primeval stones acted precisely like the gold standard of Earth, serving as the universal currency for all commodities. However, they held an even greater value to cultivators. They were highly condensed masses of natural worldly essence. Agu Master could actively extract energy straight from a primeval stone to rapidly replenish the primeval sea inside their aperture, making it an invaluable supplement that could dramatically accelerate cultivation speed and overcome low talent grades. Fang Yuan frowned as he carried the jars away, realizing his initial savings were completely drained. He knew that the upcoming refinement test was fundamentally an unfair competition dictated strictly by talent and wealth. Cultivators with higher talent grades or rich, influential family members, backing them with endless primeval stones, would easily outpace the rest. With his mediocre C-grade talent and empty pockets, he stood absolutely no chance of winning the 20-stone reward through normal means. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out sharply from behind him, ordering him to stop. Fang Yuan paused and turned around to find his twin brother, Fang Zheng, marching toward him. A sudden gust of mountain wind swept through the street, lifting Fang Yuan's messy short hair while rustling the hem of Fang Zheng's pristine new robes. In the span of a single month, a monumental shift had completely altered the dynamic between the twins. The former prodigy had fallen into the dirt, stripped of his genius title, while the once invisible younger brother was rising rapidly. Like a dazzling new star, Fang Zheng had spent the last week drowning in public adoration, experiencing the intoxicating thrill of being watched, praised, and envied by the entire village. Though he was still clumsy and easily embarrassed by the flirtations of older women, An intense inner self-confidence had finally begun to manifest within his chest. Witnessing his brother's untidy clothes and disheveled appearance filled Fang Zheng with a secret, powerful sense of vindication and validation. Trying to project a posture of authority, Fang Zheng loudly lectured his brother, demanding that he stop drinking, stop dragging himself through the mud, and wake up for the sake of the people who cared about him. Fang Yuan remained entirely emotionless, offering no verbal reply. The two brothers locked eyes in a heavy, silent standoff. Fang Zheng's gaze was sharp and keen, fueled by his new status. But Fang Yuan's twin orbs remained a deep, bottomless black, perfectly resembling a pitch-dark ancient pool. Looked into those unreadable eyes, Fang Zheng suddenly felt a strange, suffocating weight press down on his chest. Overwhelmed by an instinctive lingering fear, he subconsciously averted his gaze in a flash of deep internal anger. He was furious at himself for still lacking the courage to look his broken brother in the eye. By the time Fang Zheng forced his sharp gaze back to confront him, Fang Yuan was already moving, clutching a jar of wine in each hand. He walked right past his twin, his voice completely flat and indifferent, as he told him to stop gawking and lead the way. Fang Zheng's accumulated momentum vanished instantly, leaving him with a frustrating sense of depression. Quickening his pace to catch up, the younger twin lifted his chin high into the sunlight, deliberately marching forward, while keeping his feet planted firmly on his older brother's moving shadow. Chapter 9. Two Divergent Roads. The crimson hue of the sunset slowly receded over the horizon, leaving the sky reasonably bright but blanketed in a heavy, ominous shade of gray. As twilight approached, the distant mountains gradually dissolved into a dense, pitch-black color. Inside the living room of the family estate, the light was incredibly dim. Aunt and uncle sat highly positioned in their chairs, their faces completely enveloped in deep shadows, making their true facial expressions entirely impossible to discern. As Uncle Guye Dongtu observed Fang Yuan walking into the room, clutching two massive jars of wine, his eyebrows twisted into a tight, severe knot. Breaking the heavy silence, Uncle noted that both twins had finally reached 15 years of age and possessed the innate talents of a gu master. Expressing a fake, theatrical pride, especially regarding Fang Zheng's brilliant performance, Uncle announced that he would provide them each with a small bag containing 6 primeval stones, explaining that the process of refining a newly acquired wu worm would consume an immense volume of their primeval essence. Fang Yuan stepped forward and accepted his designated bag in complete, chilling silence. Fang Zheng, however, immediately ripped his bag open, his eyes widening at the sight of the 6 oval-shaped, grayish-white primeval stones resting inside. His face instantly flushed with profound emotional gratitude. Rising rapidly from his seat to face his relatives, the younger twin bowed deeply, vowing that their lifetime of upbringing was permanently engraved into his heart and that he would never forget this immense kindness for as long as he lived. Uncle smiled and nodded with satisfaction, while Aunt hurriedly waved her hands, speaking in a calculated, warm tone. She reminded them that despite not being her biological children, she had raised them as her very own since they were 5 years old. She added with deep, hidden meaning that because she and her husband were completely childless, she often fantasized about what it would be like if the two brothers could officially and genuinely become their true children. Fang Jing was far too naive to grasp the legal trap behind her words, but Fang Yuan's eyebrows knit together in a subtle frown. Uncle swiftly cut back into the conversation, explicitly stating that he and his wife had discussed the matter thoroughly and wished to formally adopt both brothers into a genuine family line. He looked directly at the younger twin, asking if he was willing. A joyful, ecstatic smile immediately erupted across Fang Zheng's face as he confessed that ever since their biological parents passed away, he had desperately longed for a real family of his own. Aunt's expression loosened completely into triumphant laughter, wiping away theatrical tears as she told him he was now her good son, and should immediately stop addressing them as aunt and uncle. In a sudden wave of validation, Fang Zheng instantly corrected his speech, addressing them directly as father and mother. Uncle then turned his calculating gaze toward the silent older twin, asking Fang Yuan for his stance. Fang Yuan simply shook his head, refusing the offer without uttering a single word. Fang Zheng anxiously opened his mouth to advise his stubborn brother, but Uncle stopped him, his gentle tone completely unchanged. Uncle sighed deliberately, stating that such matters could never be forced. He then looked at Fang Yuan, noting that since the boy was 15, he needed to start practicing true independence and carrying on the biological Fang bloodline. To support this transition, Uncle revealed that he had prepared a massive financial sum of 200 primeval stones to aid Fang Yuan's move. Fang Zheng's eyes nearly popped out of his head at the mention of 200 stones. He had never witnessed such vast wealth in his entire life, and an intense flash of raw jealousy instantly crossed his face. Yet, to everyone's absolute shock, Fang Yuan shook his head a second time. Before his relatives could recover their composure or speak another word, Fang Yuan flatly stated that he would take his leave, grabbed his wine jars, and marched straight out of the living hall. Fang Zheng quickly rose to pursue him, offering to reason with his eccentric brother, but Uncle waved him off, directing the household slaves to usher the young master to his new quarters. The moment Fang Zheng exited, the living room plunged into a pitch-black, freezing silence. From the darkness, Uncle's cold, vicious voice finally emerged, snarling that the clever little brat had completely seen through their legal plot. According to the strict regulations of the Gu Yue clan, an orphaned eldest son who reaches 16 years of age gains the absolute legal qualification to inherit their deceased parents' entire fortune. His massive legacy, which Aunt and Uncle had been greedily taking care of for a decade, was worth infinitely more than a measly sum of 200 stones. If Fang Yuan had agreed to the adoption, he would legally become a member of a new household, permanently forfeiting his inheritance rights. If he accepted the 200 stones to declare independence at 15, he would be violating clan regulations and signing away his legal claim. Aunt's voice grew hysterical in the dark as she panicked over losing the fortune, asking her husband how they could possibly stop him if he demanded the inheritance at 16. Uncle rolled his eyes in annoyance, whispering a sinister scheme. He explained that since the brat refused to cooperate, they would simply frame him. They would order their trusted servant girl, Shen Sui, to seduce Fang Wen while he was drunk, scream sexual assault, catch him on the spot, and fabricate a massive public scandal to legally expel him from the family line, stripping his inheritance rights forever. Meanwhile, Fang Zheng was ushered into a magnificent new bedroom by Mother Shen, the estate's powerful head housekeeper and Shen Kui's mother. The younger twin gasped as he looked around. The room was twice the size of his old quarters, featuring a massive plush bed, a rosewood desk stocked with fine ink, exquisite wall ornaments, and a soft, handmade carpet beneath his feet. Drowning in luxury and deep gratitude, Fang Zheng vowed to himself that he would claim the #1 spot in the upcoming refinement assessment to make his new parents proud. Outside the estate, thick, dark clouds completely blanketed the night sky, obscuring the stars as a violent mountain wind began to howl through the empty streets. A heavy storm was coming. Fang Yuan sneered internally as he walked alone through the cold wind, taking a slow swig of turbid wine from his jar to generate a warm sensation in his chest. He understood perfectly that across both Earth and this mystical world, humans would gladly trample over kinship and love in the ruthless pursuit of wealth. Because he had to wait an entire year to claim his parents' legal legacy, the hidden treasure of the flower, Wine Monk remained his absolute best. Short-term option. Pushing his thin clothing against the biting gale, Fang Yuan marched directly out of the secure village, gates into the pitch-black wilderness. Behind him lay the brilliant, sparkling lights of thousands of comfortable homes, including the luxurious room, where his brother was currently receiving the amorous, seductive glances of Shen Kui. Chapter 10. A storm may arise from a clear sky. Large, heavy raindrops began to violently batter the earth, rattling fiercely against the roof of the verdant bamboo house and sending endless ripples across the local ponds. The entire sky turned a thick, overcast gray, throwing a massive curtain of continuous rain across the landscape that entirely obscured the horizon. Inside his somewhat dim bedroom, Fang Yuan quietly closed the window against the heavy deluge and let out a calm sigh. The storm had raged continuously for 3 days and 3 nights. On the night he had marched out of the village with his wine jars, the sudden downpour had completely drenched him to the bone, forcing him to abort his search. The torrential rainwater would instantly wash away the wine aroma, rendering his strategy to attract the liquor worm entirely useless. Furthermore, forcing himself to scout under such extreme weather conditions would inevitably arouse the deep suspicions of the clan elders. Fang Yuan knew better than to ever underestimate the intellect of those around him. Only a fool assumed everyone else was stupid. Accepting the delay with complete psychological composure, he sat cross-legged on his bed. 500 years of grueling life experiences had long since purged any trace of youthful impulsiveness from his soul. He understood that a sudden storm could always arise from a perfectly clear sky, and that unexpected obstacles were a natural law of existence. Realizing he couldn't hunt for the liquor worm in the short term, he decided to pivot his focus and begin the difficult process of refining his moonlight goo. Closing his eyes, Fang Yuan shifted his conscious awareness deep into his body, entering his newly awakened primeval aperture. The spherical space existed mysteriously, appearing limitlessly large yet remaining infinitely small, supported safely by the thin white membrane of light left behind by the hope goo. At the bottom of the aperture lay his green-copper primeval sea, its water perfectly clear and calm like a mirror, filling exactly 44% of the total volume. Every single drop of this copper-colored essence was the absolute condensation of his vitality, soul, and life force, the vital power source required to conquer and command goo worms. Retrieving the moonlight goo from his pocket, Fang Yuan let the crystalline, light blue crescent moon rest quietly in the center of his palm. With a sharp mental command, his internal sea began to tumble, and a continuous jet of green copper primeval essence burst forth from his body, rushing straight into the insect. The moonlight goo instantly erupted into a fierce blue glow, its body trembling violently as its natural, wild will fought back aggressively against his spiritual invasion. The process of refining a wild goo was a brutal, grueling war of attrition, aimed entirely at wiping out the creature's innate independent will. Within less than 3 minutes, a severe wave of physical weakness attacked Fang Yuan's heart, turning his face deathly pale as his essence poured continuously into the crescent. After 10 minutes of intense struggle, 10% of his primeval sea had been entirely drained, yet the green copper coloration had only managed to conquer the 2 sharp tips of the crescent moon. Expanding slightly toward the center, Fang Yuan persisted for another 20 minutes until his internal sea plummeted to a dangerous 14% capacity. At this point, the green copper coloration covered a mere 1/12 of the moonlight goo's light blue surface. Realizing his limits, Fang Yuan broke off the influx of energy and halted the refinement. To make matters worse, the moment he stopped pouring in essence, the moonlight goo did not cease its resistance. It began aggressively driving his green copper energy out of its crystalline body, causing the green coloration on the crescent tips to slowly shrink. Based on the speed of this reduction, the insect would completely purge his essence within 6 hours, forcing him to start the entire process over from scratch. Fang Yuan took a piece of primeval stone from his bag, reflecting on the mechanics of cultivation. A goo master could naturally replenish their sea over time, but for a C-grade talent like himself, it took a full hour to recover a meager 4% of their essence. Within the 6-hour window, his natural recovery would only yield 24%, which was far too slow to outpace the moonlight goo's rejection rate. The only viable solution was to directly absorb pure worldly essence from a primeval stone. Holding the stone, he watched his internal water level rapidly rise under the influx of natural energy, returning to his maximum 44% limit within half an hour. This starkly highlighted the monumental unfairness of talent grades. His A-grade brother, Fang Zheng, naturally recovered 8% of his primeval essence every single hour, allowing him to easily outpace the goo's resistance with a few casual rests, completely eliminating the need to consume expensive primeval stones. Fang Zheng could comfortably refine his moonlight goo in a matter of days through raw talent alone. Fang Yuan acknowledged with absolute clarity that with only 6 stones in his possession and a C-grade talent, winning the Academy's 20-stone reward was a statistical impossibility. He refused to engage in an unwinnable war of attrition, deciding it was far wiser to preserve his energy and wait for the weather to clear so he could resume his hunt for the priceless liquor worm. Just as he noticed the sound of the rain outside getting lighter, a soft, deliberate knock suddenly echoed from his front door. From the storm outside, the sweet, laced voice of his servant girl, Shen Kui, softly filtered through the panels. She announced that because it had been pouring for 3 days, she had brought him warm food and wine to ease his deep, depressed feelings. Sitting in the dim silence of his room, Fang Yuan opened his pitch-black eyes, a chilling, calculated gaze cutting through the shadows, as his uncle's insidious trap was finally sprung.